Welcome to Season 2 of Gray Maybe, a limited series podcast and social experiment based on this season's topic, the body. My name is Jillian Schmitz. I'm a professional dancer, actor, teacher, author, artist, and cat lover. Through my own personal journey of recovery, I've found that things aren't just black or white, or as simple as yes or no. For me, in my recovery, there has been mostly gray area and a lot of maybes. In most of my stories, you can find the gray maybe. I will be sharing my own process through personal stories, interviews, and hopefully stories from listeners in an effort to help lessen the stigma and shame of disordered eating, eating disorders, and body image. If you'd like to share your story of ED recovery on this podcast, anonymous or otherwise, please email graymaybestories@gmail.com, graymaybestories@gmail.com. Before we get started, if you haven't already, please subscribe on whichever platform you're using to catch future episodes of Gray Maybe. A note before we begin. The topic of disordered eating, eating disorders, body dysmorphia, and other behavior related to the body may not be difficult for me to share anymore, but it wasn't always this way. I recognize and anticipate the possibility of judgment or disbelief about my experiences, ranging from my own family members to strangers, in addition to the potentiality of losing certain opportunities for publicizing my own experiences. My stories and the stories of others on this podcast are told through the lens of our own experience. The revelation of our process is ours to tell. If you disagree with the views or stories on this podcast, know that we are not speaking on anything other than our own experiences and viewpoints. Take what you like and leave the rest. Nothing expressed or mentioned in this podcast is an endorsement or is meant to be taken as suggestion or advice. It is strictly the sharing of our own experiences and recovery. Any feelings this podcast activates in the listener is for the listener to process and recover from. Any criticism you have based on these experiences and choices are yours, and they are not anyone else's burden to carry. Trigger warning: eating disorders, disordered eating, overeating, binge eating, drug use, suicide, alcoholism, unwanted touching, addiction, clowns, religion, depression, anxiety, restrictive eating, bulimia, and body dysmorphia. Welcome back, everybody, to the Gray Maybe podcast. I'm psyched if you're coming back and listening. Today, I have a very, very cool person. I actually just met this person. This person comes to me as a recommendation from one of my prior guests. If you were, lucky enough to listen to the episode with Melissa Adelia Calisans. She had a really, really cool episode. And if you haven't listened to it, I highly suggest going back and listening to it. It's a very, very unique perspective amongst this season's topic. It's kind of niche to what we're talking about, but it's something that I think is super important. So she recommended this lovely, lovely person. This person's name is Keida Mascaro. And Keida is, I'm finding out, is a comedian and also very much a producer, which I very much relate to because I've done some producing, and that is a very, very rough job, but a very rewarding job. So Keida, thank you so much for coming onto the pod today. You're also a fellow 12-stepper, which I absolutely appreciate. Welcome to Gray Maybe.
Hey, thank you so much. It's really good to be here.
And will you just give me any other intro you want? Because, I'm sure you have more to say about yourself than I'm going to give you.
Well, it's hard to say. But I think the thing that... So this is what I tell people. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with pirates. And
I saw that on your Instagram, and I was like, I kind of want to give him the shout-out pirate. But, also, he's a producer and pirate.
yeah.
But I was like, oh, maybe he won't know what I'm talking about. Okay, so do tell.
So basically, I was obsessed with pirates and Swiss Family Robinson and all all that island stuff, and also Indians. I really loved American Indians, and I figured I just wanted to live like that. And I also was obsessed with, carnivals and circuses. And so I always wanted to live this lifestyle of a pirate. But, today it's a different world we live in today, of course. So I try to live like a pirate in every way. Um, so that has looked like everything from performance art. I've produced uh, 3 feature films. I directed one, um, made a million short length, videos and films. I did a bunch of photography, a lot of conceptual art over the years, performance art. The latest thing that I've been doing is comedy and getting into acting. I shoot comedy, but I'm also on the stage, and I'm taking a clown course right now, and I'll probably end up taking the whole. I'm obsessed with it. It's awful, but it's amazing.
Can you
Um,
tell us a little bit about what's going on in a clown course?
well, I'll tell you what's not going on in a clown course.
Okay.
I thought I started a fellow friend of mine, comic, told Joel Klein. He and I were having lunch, and we were trading like what we've been doing, and he said, I'm taking this clown class, and it's like the most amazing thing. It's hard, and it's changed my life. And I was like, clown class? And I was like, well, of course, it's LA, of course there's a clown class. Well, it turns out there's a clown school, and it's in Atwater. And so I signed up for the first class, and I thought you'd walk in the room and there'd be bins of outfits and noses, and like you just pick the
Curly
outfit,
wigs. Pick your
wigs.
curly wig color.
Yeah,
It's all
just
rainbow. Just
pick it
mix and
all up,
match.
grab some balls, and then just
Yeah.
run around juggling and stuff. Well, that was absolutely not what it is. Every class, I basically tell people it's like this. Everybody's had that uncle that tickles when you don't want, and hopefully not in the worst ways. And
Right.
um, and
The
anyway,
slightly annoying one, not the one that,
not the
yeah.
weird one, but the
Yes,
the
yes.
annoying friendly uncle that just
Yes.
jabs his finger in you. Well, the class feels like 100 of those fingers in you for 4 hours every Sunday night is what it feels
And you
like.
paid for this.
I paid a lot of money for this, actually. Yeah. And what it is, and this is the brilliance of it, is that it's nothing right now. Now, granted, I'm in the intro class, so it does eventually
Okay.
get to outfits and
To picking out curly wigs and big shoes.
Yeah, for sure. But the first part of it is it's all internal. It's like what you
Okay.
do is it's exercise after exercise where the and it's David Bridell is the brilliant founder of the school. And it feels like I'm in grad school, actually. It feels like I'm in grad dance school is what it is. And basically he prompts us with an emotion. What we have to do is locate the emotion inside, and then we have to project it out in movement and in sound. And when I say sound, mostly non-verbal sound. It's like
Not words, just sounds.
No, just sounds.
Not even sounds. Sounds, but not words.
Occasionally he'll let us throw in a word, but he's like, what does it sound like with no word? What is anger? Like we'll have to, like, for example, we'll have to design a march. And so we design a march. He'll put us in pairs in a group of 4. And he's like, okay, pick an emotion. And then you have to design a march that's synchronistic. And then also a vocalization that goes with that march. And it could be a vocalization with your mouth, or it could also be percussive.
Okay.
It's crazy. And then, pretty much every exercise is meant to push you at the edge of comfort. And he's been real explicit that the clown is, number one, the clown is public, meaning whatever the clown is going through emotionally, the clown has to share it with the audience.
Right. Everybody has to be able to see it and identify it.
Yeah. Or else, which is ironic because I think most people think of clowns as like in a costume and hidden, but actually,
right.
So in a sense, the costumes are for the whatever you're projecting. They're not to hide. So
right.
it's absolutely fascinating. I should have gone to this school for grad school. I'm
It's
not
so
knocking
cool.
Ohio
I had
State.
no
I'm glad I went there,
idea.
but yeah,
Where did you go? Sorry, I kind of
Ohio State
interjected.
University.
Ohio
Got
State.
my MFA. Yeah,
Okay, cool. I
but this
didn't know any
was
about that, about
it,
clown school.
it's just the most. When I tell you how brutal it is, though, people are like, "Are you having a fun time?" And I'm like, "No, not at all. I mean, it's not fun. These exercises are brutal, but it's high value.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, it's super high
Yeah.
value. And with the thing that's astonishing to me, and this relates with 12 step and our stuff. What's astonishing to me is I growing up on the East Coast in Italian background and almost 25 years sober and active in recovery, I would have thought that I would have assumed if you said, how in touch with you am I with emotions
Mhm.
and how fluid am I with expressing myself, I would have thought I was very fluent.
Mhm.
And what this class has taught me is that I'm actually um, completely illiterate with movement and with vocalization. And not completely, but almost entirely. I maybe have the literacy of like a 3-year-old.
Wow. So you have spent 25 years in recovery, which is usually for those of you who may not be uh super well known with the recovery programs of 12 steps is like you're sharing in meetings. Oftentimes that is like it's always usually in front of strangers, maybe a few people you might know, but all program related. And there is a in-depth search, moral inventory, all the emotions, all the things through 12 steps. So it's definitely not for the faint of heart. It's definitely an exercise in vulnerability and exposing yourself. So if you're saying after 25 years of doing that, mostly on the weekly, sometimes on the daily, depending on what people's
Oh
meeting
yeah,
schedule
yeah.
is and their sponsorship
Thousands
relationships,
of
like
meetings.
that's insane. That's insane.
Well, I guess now that you put it that way, it could indicate that I have a horrible recovery.
No, no. You know what? Listen, I don't judge anyone's recovery other than like period. I'm in a program for that, for not, taking people's inventory. But and if you're in that program, you get that joke. But like I think you being 25 years sober is a pretty big deal.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's insane. I mean, it's weird because it means I'm 25 years older, and that is a shock every time I hear that and see that. And back to the clown school. What's so fun about the clown school and also awful is that I'm so bad at everything, and I'm all in David. Fucking love David. Sorry, I swore. I swear a lot. Is that okay to
Oh no,
swear on
this
this
is a
podcast?
swearing. This is a swearing
Is this swear
podcast.
positive?
It's swear positive.
Because that's
Yeah.
yeah, swearing is my like language. So it and David, what is so brilliant about this guy is he's sweet and I trust him, but he fucks with everybody in the class,
Of
and it's
course, he's a
really
clown.
funny.
He's a
But he
clown,
doesn't
no,
do
right?
it. He doesn't do it in a shitty way. It's not like he doesn't
He's a
abuse his
professional clown.
he doesn't
He knows
abuse
what's
his
up.
power. You know what I mean? But he really and of course, I do everything wrong. I'm left-handed. I'm dyslexic, and I've got ADHD. Probably, I'm not diagnosed, but I know I have it.
Hmm.
So I've got like every problem you could have for like coordination and synchronicity, and I'm just a disaster. No one I can already tell, even though everybody kind of loves each other in the class,
Hmm.
I can already tell no one wants to be my partner unless it's a
Oh.
unless it's a contest. Then they want me to be their partner
Oh,
because I'm going
stop.
to lose. But if it's like the marches, they don't want me in, and it's funny because I'm not saying they're mean about it, but I'm such a problem in the class.
I feel like this would be an advantage in clown class to be like the person who can't quite like
Maybe
no,
later in
like
the first
maybe
class,
later. Okay, yeah.
because I'm always being called out, and I just do everything stupid. It's just the most, you know. There's nowhere to hide in the class.
Right.
So what I've had to do is just resign myself to and what's weird is like, all right, so I'm almost 50, and the thing that sucks about that is pretty much everything that you imagine sucks about being almost 50, and more things. And And I have such an invisibility issue right now, and I feel so invisible mostly. And I talk about this in stand up. You know, I went from having like a really amazing social and dating life, and then all of a sudden it just the bottom fell out a number of years ago, and I've been invisible, to me at least, feeling. And after taking a week of the clowns class, I'm like, this is the opposite of what I really like. I should be going to a coach on how to look good on dating apps, not a clown school.
But is that what you thought, or that's what you experienced?
What is what I thought
Like
it
a
was,
week
right?
after clowns class, a week after being in clown class, you're like, this is the last thing I should be doing, like in theory
The
in your
last
brain?
thing ever
Or
I
is this
should.
what you're experiencing like out? Like you think it's making your dating situation worse?
Well, no, it's not making my dating situation worse. It's just like I don't need help looking dumber than I look. So it's it's I thought I was like, oh, this is gonna open me up. Maybe there's some cute girls in there. What it turns out is that I look. There's no way to look good in this class. That's the whole point, is to not look good in the class.
I know you mentioned like feeling invisible. I think that definitely is something that a lot of older ladies and more mature women can relate to. I think there is kind of societally this idea that after you're past childbearing age, you're just kind of like not really useful anymore and like just kind of discounted. Even if that's not at the forefront of the conversation, I think there is kind of this feeling amongst society in that way that like, oh, you're old now, you can't have children, like move along, like go hide, like we're
Yeah.
done with you. Well, okay, so I was saying all that in clown school, and I'm very interested in how this goes. I might need to like do a follow up to see
You would
what the
actually love
outcome
it. You should probably
in clown
consider
school.
going.
I actually like I don't know if I've seen a lot of clowns I really like. Clowns to me are kind of like magicians. Like they always seem like they're trying to prove something to you. And I'm always just
Yeah.
like, get away from me. I don't need to be proved anything to. But maybe this whole thing would be like, yeah, like a very, like up until you said make a noise with that sound, I was like, this sounds like therapy. Like this sounds like what I'm supposed to do when I'm
Hugely
sitting
therapeutic.
across my therapist. Okay. So, Keita, you're here today mostly because you and I had a great conversation on the phone, kind of like, just talking about things. And, you know, in accordance to this season of the podcast, we're talking about body stuff. And you gave me some really great, recovery. And you also told me a lot about how this, like in specific, the body stuff showed up for you. And would you mind telling listeners, like, do you remember when it kind of began for you? Body stuff, body dysmorphia stuff, eating disorder, disordered eating, any kind of those earliest signs, symptoms, behaviors, stuff like that.
Well, uh, it started. Let's see. It started with the. I remember telling you about the safe that I got a little safe when I was a
Please
kid.
tell this story because this is so interesting.
Yeah, so I got this little safe when I was a kid. It was like like a little money
It's
thing
like
you
a
put.
toy safe because
Yeah,
I
like a
had
toy.
a similar one.
Yeah, not like some huge, little
Yeah, it's
tiny
like
safe that I'm supposed.
plastic. You like
Yeah,
put the little dimes and the pennies
yeah.
and they go in their own little areas, their
It's a
own
little
little
piggy bank, but it looked like a
yes.
safe, and it had a little roll thing that you had a combo lock thing, and it opened the door. And my parent, someone got. I don't remember who got it for me, and it's not important. But it, I remember what I did not put money in there. What I did is I put bags of different bags of sugar and cocoa powder from the kitchen, and
So you had like
each
white sugar, brown sugar,
white sugar,
cocoa
brown
powder.
sugar, cocoa powder, confectioner's sugar,
Oh, powdered
two
sugar.
different
Good call.
two different the light and dark brown sugar.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Um, and I put a little measuring spoon in the bank. And what I would do is I would just go in there and like eat.
You were going to the bank,
Yeah, I
going to
was
the
going to
bank
the
for your
bank and I was
sugar.
eating. See, this is why I'm bad with money, because all I did back then was take spoons out. I didn't really
Right.
put the spoons in until it was empty. Um, so anyway, I used to eat. Yeah, I used to get high on sugar, and that was
Uh
like
huh.
I mean I was 4 years old when I started that.
Wow.
5. I
Wow.
don't
Wow. Wow.
remember how
Wow.
young I
Wow.
was. It was a long time ago, and I used to keep it in the closet. I knew to hide it, so that I already knew somehow
They
because
hid
this
your
is
safe or the
I
sugar?
hid the safe and
Oh,
I
you
hid
hid
the
it.
sugar in the safe and then I hid the safe in a closet.
Okay, so you were
So
secretive about it.
so I already knew somehow that this is not normal behavior, even though conceptually I did not think that, you
Right.
know. And I totally forgot about the safe until I was in college and I had a box that I kept all my drugs in.
Hmm.
And I remember I was really OCD about, like, you know, keeping my cocaine in a certain bag and the heroin in another bag and the pot in another bag and acid in another bag and just every type of drug. Well, those were the only
Every
drugs I was
type of
taking.
sugar.
Yeah, it was like in I remember sitting there, I'd be sitting there during the day going, okay, I'd look through just like I did with the sugar. I would
Hmm.
look through and be like, okay, well where am I going tonight?
Hmm.
You know, where am I going today? And it was just crazy to me. It all of a sudden I had that flashback of childhood and I was like, holy shit,
Right.
I've been doing this for ever, you know?
Right.
Um the body stuff, you know, there's a number of stuff. There's some sexual stuff um, that you know, it's just a bunch of blurry stuff that I'm not really, you know, it's there's some there's some early trauma with mental stuff. I don't know, having dyslexia is another.
Hmm.
I got held back in first grade, but there was no, you know, the school sucked. School system that
Hmm.
I was in sucked,
Hmm.
and I just, you know, they just held me back. They just, you know, it was considered probably dumb or something, and I
Right.
got
Like
held back.
most people who have any kind of a alternative learning style, any kind of learning disabilities or differently abled, I really feel like got labeled and kind of mushed into one pile growing up. You're a little bit older than me. And I do feel like so many of us got overlooked or just kind of like, oh, I guess you're just not very smart in this area. When in actuality, it was so much more than that. And nowadays, I do think like some of that's gotten a little better. But yeah, it's not surprising if you had like a different style of learning that you just got kind of labeled like, oh, you're stupid and now you got to get held back. When in actuality, that's probably not the case at all.
It was, yeah, it was a nightmare, and I, you know, so from a very young age, I remember, like, you know, by the first grade, I had already had like some suicidal ideation,
By first
and
grade,
yeah, and I
that's like
didn't,
7 years old.
yeah,
7 or 8.
I didn't even think I didn't even think that was strange until I was years later in recovery. Uh,
Mhm.
people in recovery were like, Jesus Christ, you know,
Mhm.
and and so and my mom was also really. I mean, we were a Catholic. Not my parents were hippies. They weren't really religious, but we had to go to all this Catholic stuff, which I
Mhm.
hated,
You
and
and I share that. I
oh,
also
hated it,
had
hated everything
hate
about it.
it.
I
Hate
liked
it.
my priests though, and not ironically, they were I it was not sexual, thankfully, but I had some really great priests that were nice. You know what I mean? And I really confided in, and
You lucked out there.
that was honestly, I know that was the only thing I liked about anything relating to Catholic Church. I loved two things. I loved the priests that I had in my church,
Mhm.
and I love an empty church. And to this day, I
Mhm.
love an empty church. The people
Mhm.
I don't like, but the church I love. But you know, just the symbolism and the
Mhm.
quiet. I can sit in an empty church and feel pretty good, but
Mhm.
all of the rest of it, forget it. But
Right. Right.
and that's just me. I'm not saying anybody should do what I'm saying. So, but yeah, so my mom was really prudish with regard to my brothers and I. I don't know. I mean, there were three of us. I'm the oldest, and it's like on some level, my mom was it was like we were almost like Amish Catholic in a way.
Mhm.
Like there was no any urge or, you know, desire or show of masculinity was like just struck down. I
Wow.
felt not in an oppressive way, but I don't know. There was just an underlying prudish kind of and I think it's
Oppressive kind
the
of.
Catholic thing. I mean, it was just
Yeah.
like my mom. I would give myself haircuts because my mom could not resist giving me a haircut that looked like Alice from the Brady Bunch.
Oh no. Oh
The fucking
no.
worst. And it didn't matter
Oh
what I asked
no.
for. So I started cutting my own hair,
Right.
and then I started cutting my brother's hair because she did the same thing to my brothers. She gave him these ridiculous haircuts.
And
God bless her.
you couldn't let him go
No, and I
through
was like, my
that.
mom's not going to ruin my brother's non-sex life as a kid. So I used to cut their hair, cut my hair, um, and it wasn't until so I don't know. I just had every issue you could imagine. I'm just a neurotic human being. I mean, that's kind of what the bottom line is. And I don't know
I
if it's
re-
nurture or nature. I don't know. It doesn't really matter.
I relate to that neurosis, although I've been able to somehow like very much present very cool, calm, and collected, which has been a lot of work. It's been incredibly taxing all of these years. But I have come to accept that I'm actually extremely neurotic, extremely anxious. So I really identify with that. Do you identify at all like as a thing when it comes to like OA or like eating disorders, disordered eating? Like, do you have like are there main behaviors? Like, for instance, I would identify as a restrictive, sometimes binging orthorexic, who is got body dysmorphia.
um, I don't know. That's a hard question. I do know that I overeat. I like
Hmm.
I don't I hate restricting eating.
Hmm.
That's definitely not. Yeah, I wish I liked to restrict more.
Hmm.
Um, I've always had a weakness for chocolate and sugar, and
Right. You
um,
talked a lot about like how sugar is kind of like just it for you.
it's the last kind of thing, and it's well, it's not the. I mean, I don't know. It's like a whack a mole game, you know.
Hmm.
Um, but
I do know.
the
I
you
do.
know,
Like, I don't know if people understand this. Like, if you, and I don't want to say this is just people who have quote unquote addictive personalities or whatever that is, but oftentimes when you start getting recovery in one area, you start doing something else that's not so great. Or that other thing was happening, but now it's like turned up. It is like whack a mole. It's like making holes in a balloon and then putting band-aid over one. The other hole is still gonna start like leaking air. It is though, it's whack a mole. You whack one and then another one pops. You whack another one and the other one pops up. So absolutely, I do know exactly what that is, and I think people who are in our predicament kind of understand what that is.
the two best things you can do if you're an addict, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, go get some kind of recovery.
Mm-hmm.
In the recovery in my where I'm at in my view of recovery, recovery is entirely about learning how to accept how fucked up you are
Right.
first. And then maybe if you can get to that, maybe you experience some kind of relief somewhere. Number two, find something creative in life because
Mm-hmm.
your addiction is the golden goose of creativity.
Mm-hmm.
And thank God I have such an amazingly interesting life to me. I'm not saying to anybody else necessarily,
Mm-hmm.
but to me, I've managed to create this really exciting life that I'm like when I was a kid, I always wanted my. All right, I gotta qualify this with like my mom was obsessed. My mom and I are very similar. She's very
Mm-hmm.
obsessive about stuff. She would listen to albums over and over again all day long for weeks on end, the same album. And
Mm-hmm.
it that kind of weirdness rubbed off on me. So I'm the same way. I wear the same clothes all the time. I, eat the same food. That's how it would qualify with food. I'm one of these
Right.
weirdos that eats the same damn like I actually did a bit about it on stage because it was St. Patty's Day and I was on stage at the Roosevelt, and I was like, "Well, I'm not an alcoholic, and I think of St. Patty's Day as like the big drinking day." And so
Yeah.
I shared with the people. I was backstage in the green room, and I was like, "Well, if I'm not drinking, like, what do I do addictively that I can share on St. Patty's Day?" And I
Mm-hmm.
realized that for the last 2 years, I've been eating uh, oatmeal every night, and I eat it
Mm-hmm.
with two bananas. And so
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to do this equation right now. I was sitting there, and I was like, two bananas a day. All right, let
Mm-hmm.
me get the two times how many days? 7 days in a week times four
Mm-hmm.
times 12. That means I'm eating 672 bananas a year.
That's your banana habit.
And but here's the thing: I shop at Trader Joe's, and it only costs me $194 a
It's
year
a pretty cheap habit.
to eat. Yeah, $194. That's every day I'm eating two bananas a day for a year. That's $194. That I could have put that up in my nose in like 2 days. So I feel like this is a much better habit. And my doctor would probably say the cholesterol effects of bananas and oatmeal is much better than cocaine.
I would agree. Yeah, I'm not a doctor, but I feel like that's an easy yes.
So why am I telling you all this?
Well,
Wait, what was I originally getting
there's a
at?
say this is a thing. There is something called safe foods that
Uh huh.
people do all the time. A safe food. So I have a certain way of doing a safe food. When I'm having trouble understanding what I'm hungry for, if I'm having a hard time eating, because I do like to restrict a lot as a way to cope with control or a lack of control, there are things that I know of as safe foods. These are foods that I will almost always eat, that I know what to expect. They're usually prepackaged, unfortunately. Not that I like that, but like I just know what to expect. They're very consistent, and I always kind of will be able to eat them if I start. There's other people who have things that are safe foods because they have texture issues with foods. So they're very tied to specific foods as safe because they know the texture and the consistency and it's predictable. And then there's other people who have safe foods who might be more in line of like neurodivergency that you're kind of talking about, where it's like, this is my super hyperfixation food. And I'm going to eat this every day until I can't stand it, but it could be a really long time before I switch it to something else. And, so to me, like you're describing, that makes complete sense and it makes perfect sense to me. That like that would be something that if you struggle with sugar or you struggle with body stuff, that you're like, this is my safe food. This is what I eat every day. And this is what helps me feel comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. And, one thing that was a big theme in my family, especially with my mother, and, a lot of the stuff I take from my mom. I told my parents one day, I inherited every horrible trait from both of you. And it, and it's true. Look, we have a very sardonic kind of sense of humor, and that was meant to be funny, not,
I
I
have
wasn't.
said that. I have said many times I inherited my mom's anxiety and my dad's depression.
Yeah, it's just the every worst fucking thing. The only thing I haven't inherited is like my mom has a hammered toe or whatever, and I haven't gotten that yet. But everything else is just the worst. And so, but the one thing my mom did all the time was she eats to soothe the eats,
Hmm.
and of course that was like such a wonderful coping mechanism that I adapted to. And that's one of those things. Like I never eat for like sustenance. I mean, I
Hmm.
do. I have to eat, obviously.
Right.
But every time I eat, it's always it's got. I never eat something because I'm like I have to eat that for health. Now, I'm a really really good cook,
Hmm.
and I love food and cooking. So I happen to cook most of the meals that I eat from scratch, and I'm
Hmm.
really kind of I've become I've always been when we were kids we used to garden and we are always picking my mom every night would be like
Hmm.
go out and pick the lettuce, pick the salad, which would be all the stuff we grew in the backyard. So they were great
Excellent.
about cooking us really great food and
Hmm.
home cooking and hippie this and that. And so
Hmm.
so that's translated to me. Like I've got, an old lady's kitchen and like, everything you can imagine to cook with. Um, but I still like everything I eat, there is a soothe element to it. There's nothing I eat that isn't soothing.
Hmm.
And you know, what are you gonna do? You're gonna die
Well,
one
and
of
I
these
think,
days. So.
yeah, I mean, I think that's like kind of like one of the things that like kind of separates those of us who might be in a program like OA to people who aren't is that need to kind of reach for food for soothing, for an emotion, or not reach for food to, quell an emotion. Um, so it's like people who are eating to kind of cover up emotion or to numb out are definitely like they're in the club, whether they want to be or not. Like they're in the club, and OA as an inclusive um, program is very much about just people who are might be a little weird with food or a lot weird with food, or you know, food is how they express themselves in a weird way. Like even though I never feel like my situation is about the food. That's kind of what is the almost the vocabulary of my you know disorder or dis-ease, whatever you want to call it. So was there any time like with the food stuff, or even just like with some of the other stuff, because I'm kind of like, so much of our discomfort I feel like is not only in one place. I feel like all veins kind of lead to the heart, but it's like multifaceted in how people express themselves or the behaviors they have. But was there a time in your life that you were like, okay, this was a rock bottom, or a situation where you were like, this, I need help? Was there a moment for you? Were there several moments like that? Was it a
With the
slow,
food,
yeah, or just even if there, if like, if it wasn't like a hard rock bottom for the food, was there a catalyst for going in the direction of wanting to um, address that or investigate it?
um, see the my food stuff is always intertwined with the sex stuff,
Okay.
and I would say my urgency towards dealing with my food stuff was always based on wanting to be attractive to the opposite sex in my
Mm-hmm.
case. So anytime and in my case, I was always like, my propensity is towards gaining weight.
Mm-hmm.
And so, especially the way I eat, it's always like, it's always going to end up me gaining 20 pounds. And I'm not that tall. So gaining 20 pounds for me, which is kind of like a normal weight gain, is like, I feel like I look like I gained 100 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's always, yeah. So, I mean, and that's a vein, it's never been a health issue, even though it should be, like there's, cholesterol issues and diabetes issues in my family. So,
Mm-hmm.
it should be that. And it is that when I'm thinking from a higher place. But for me, it was all a little bit more vain. It was like, I don't want to balloon out but then it's that now I'm like, well, what do I get rid of? How do I, and I'm always, the sugar thing is especially in recovery, sugar
Mm-hmm.
thing is, not being on drugs and alcohol. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, especially Coke. It's like, I
Mm-hmm.
really enjoy, I'm not gonna lie, I enjoy drinking coffee in the morning and then a
Yeah, the
little bit of
speedy.
chocolate, and all of a
Yeah,
sudden
you
I'm
want the
like
speedy.
feeling
Yeah.
good, and but so I don't know if that answers the question directly, but it's, looking. There were times where I went into, like, say, an OA meeting, or
Mm-hmm.
some kind of eating issue meeting, um, and a lot of it was, this isn't a thing that's causing me huge problems right now, but it could be. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? And especially with the way I am, and I'm a volatile human being.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe not as much now. I'm a little bit more settled down, but there was a time in my early recovery where I was like, I could see myself just going so far into a different addiction. And so I started in the early, I got sober off of drugs and alcohol. And then soon after that, I started nosing around other fellowships, because I was like, well, I just wanted to be preemptive about it. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't want to, because I knew some people that were deathly dealing on a like deathly level with food, with
Right.
Al-Anon issues, with,
Mm-hmm.
just like the levels of insanity, sex addiction. So
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wanted to keep all of that at bay to some degree by getting recovery in my
You're
brain.
like on tour, 12-step tours, just going around to
Yeah.
all the
And I
fellowships.
qualify for all of it. I mean, there's
Yeah.
nothing
Yeah.
there's nothing in my life I can't make into an addiction if I want, you know?
Yeah.
It's like,
I relate to that. Yeah, I will find any way to do something too much, and
yeah.
I do it in my brain all the time. Like this is how my brain works. If a medicine, like, oh, let's even say like a freaking vitamin, right? Like a vitamin, and let's say the back of the vitamin says, serving is 1,000 milligrams. That's 2 tablets. I'm like, well, if 1,000 is good, then 4,000's got to be great. Like, why does my brain do that? Like, no, it's not
Yeah.
great. Like, you can poison yourself doing this, but for some reason, for me, everything more is always more. For some reason, and it's insane that that's always kind of how my brain works. You talked about the vanity, and I relate to that because so much of my restricting and all this stuff is towards the vanity, right? But at the end of the day, it's really about that if I get really honest about it, it's that I think my life will be better if I look better. I think I will be happier if I look better. And if I look better, to me is never looking better. It's always, to me, like being thinner, and I don't see myself with real eyes. Like I see myself with very distorted vision. So that's a crapshoot as to if I'm attaining that or not. But
Yeah.
it's always this, it's chasing the dragon of if I can be and attain and I will get if I can only get to this size or this whatever. And it's a lie. And if I even got there, I'm not happy anyway. So it never actually comes to fruition, but it never ceases my brain to think the same thing all the time, as well as constantly like not taking, recommendations correctly because of how my brain just like changes things.
Yeah.
Um, can you tell me a little bit about um, being a man and going to like an OA meeting, which is Overeaters Anonymous? Like, did you have a hard time going to a program like that? Because I do think that those types of issues are probably predominantly thought of as women's issues or women. Like, I do know some men that go to OA. It's definitely, there's usually more women than men at meetings, but I have
Mhm.
seen like quite a bit of dudes at these meetings. Like, was that hard for you, or were you just kind of in recovery so much that you're like, screw it, it doesn't really matter?
Yeah, no, I've never had a real hard time with that's never been an issue for me that much, and I'm really grateful for that because a lot of people get very embarrassed going into different meetings, and that's never been. I've always been like the dumb dog that's just like happy to jump in a room. Um, so
Well, also like, what was your? Do you mind if I ask you what
no,
your first program was? Like, what's
AA
your
was
first
my
12 step?
first. Yeah,
AA. Okay.
AA was
So
first.
once you go into AA and you sit and everybody goes, you like, I don't, every meeting's structured a little different, but most meetings you have to identify. So once you're sitting in a chair and you're saying, hi, my name is Jillian and I'm an alcoholic, that pretty much breaks you from there on out. Like, if
Yeah,
you're going to sit in front of a room full of strangers and like because I still don't know if I'm an alcoholic, I'm sober. I know that when I drink, I want to drink every day and that I don't want to drink just one drink. Now, do I drink till I black out and I'm puking and I'm ruining my life and I'm driving my car into poles? No. But maybe if I kept going, there definitely
yeah.
were some questionable choices I made. But to sit in a room and like take any kind of accountability in front of all these other people, it kind of breaks you so that you can kind of go into any of these programs and be like, yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah, and it's also like yeah. I mean, I do acknowledge that there are a lot of people out there that are very uncomfortable with exposing themselves.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And that is, but I also come from an extremely self-deprecating,
Hmm.
sardonic Italian East Coast family, so that was beating the hell out of me. I mean, we're always slamming each other and making jokes, and it's never been we've my family, and this is something I love about my family. We've always made comedy out of
Hmm.
tragedy. You know
That's
what I
where
mean?
that's where the best comedy comes from is tragedy.
Yeah, thank God, because I know friends
Fortunately and
that
unfortunately, yeah.
I have friends that came up in like real Nordic or Germanic closed, don't say anything, and that sucked for them. But so that really, I think, prepped me for that.
Hmm.
And also I'm a goofball. It's just my personality is like I'm a weirdo and a goofball. So I think
Hmm.
that, like, I remember the first time I set foot in an Al-Anon meeting. This is this is so
So
funny to
for
me.
I want to hear this story, and I just want to preface
Yeah,
for
yeah,
people who may not know,
yeah.
Al-Anon is for people who have a loved one or a partner or a friend or a family member who suffers from alcoholism. You also are totally valid in these meetings if you were raised by alcoholics or other Al-Anons, or if your parents' parents were alcoholics or Al-Anons. So it's kind of an all-inclusive term for someone who, and also sometimes you're right there. It feels right to be there if your parents are mentally ill or if someone around you is addicted to drugs. It's all kind of a similar thing. So go on. You went into an Al-Anon meeting.
So I'm 2 years sober, and I was
Okay.
having a dry spell with women, and I was like, ah, God, it's awful. I'm like not getting any kind of action on the woman front.
Hmm.
And a friend of mine was like, oh, you know where you need, and this is in LA. He's like,
Oh
oh,
no. He said
you
you
know
got
where
to go to that.
he's like, you know where you gotta go. He's like, you gotta go to Al-Anon meetings. And I was like, really? What do you mean? And he's like, oh, it's full of women that love alcoholics like you.
Oh my gosh. Now, I can't be super mad at him because it is kind of brilliant.
Totally brilliant. But what happened was, this is how funny that was. So I take myself into an Al-Anon meeting, and of course in LA,
Hoping to make a date, hoping to meet some
hoping to
ladies.
make it a date. And Al-Anon it's funny because I've gone to meetings in Ohio and I've gone to meetings in LA. In LA, Al-Anon meetings, at least back, this is 23 years ago, they were
Hmm.
loaded with young, good-looking women. And so all women of all types, mostly women,
Yeah.
mostly single, mostly
Yeah.
Hollywood, you know. So I get in this room and I'm like, holy shit, how did I not know this existed, right?
Gold mine.
And I just look around and I find the cutest woman in the room and I sit next to her like a total asshole. I'm telling you right now, I'm admitting it, asshole. Sit next to her, no joke, got numbers at the end of the meeting. We ended up dating for 2 years. So it worked. And
Yeah,
that
it
was
worked.
that. And now I will say this: I've matured, and now I really love Al-Anon meetings. Not for that element, but because they're really great meetings. And what's interesting about OA, which was fascinating to me, um, like one person, their trigger food could be, donuts, right? But the person
Hmm.
next to them, it's fucking peanut butter. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So where it's like for me, I'm like, I hate raw peanut butter. You know what I mean? I
Hmm.
could eat a peanut butter sandwich in an OA meeting and
Hmm.
I'm not triggered, but the
Hmm.
person next to me, that could be their trigger food.
Yeah.
Whereas like, my chocolate, I'd attack someone for chocolate. So
Right.
and then back to another thing that you asked. When I went to OA meetings, it was at this recovery. It was Fountain Fairfax. There was a meeting in that church,
Okay.
and that
Hmm.
was like I don't think they have meetings anymore, but that was ground zero. They had a million different meetings in there, and there was an OA meeting in there that I loved going to, and it happened to be in a gay part of town, obviously, and so it was a really nice ratio between men and women. I was probably
Yes.
the only straight guy in
Yes.
there,
Lots of gay men that are,
but it was nicely,
wrestling with that
yeah.
pressure of that community. Yeah.
But it was like, for anybody who might be listening that's like, oh, I'm a dude and I don't want to be in a OA meeting with a bunch of women,
Right.
which I get it.
Right.
Go to a gay area of town and go
That's
to
a really good piece of advice.
because I guarantee you if it's West Hollywood and there's an OA meeting, it's going to be half men. It'll be more comfortable, probably. I
I
mean,
think
I
that's a
never care about that, but
Right. I think that's a good note for men in general because I do think that, like, I mean, I don't have the stats on it. I'm going to assume that it might be a little more difficult for men to want to get help just based on, like, stats of men seeking therapy. So if you are a man and any of the 12-step programs, if you are concerned about your dating life or women seeing you a certain way, if that is holding you back, definitely go to West Hollywood. If you're in California, go to that area because that the ratio is going to probably be in your favor. So
yeah.
that's actually kind of like a nice little hack for
And it's
I
also,
because I would hate for men not to get help because of that. But it's
yeah,
real.
and what's great about it too is that I just find in general meetings that have a higher gay population
Hmm.
it are also tend to be there's just a softer kind of feel to the meeting.
More
There's not as
inclusive.
much and this I never found this an issue with OA, but I feel like even in AA, it's like when you're in too straight of a room and there's too many dudes in the room, it can get this bro vibe. which
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
personally can't stand that shit. So it gets, but whatever. People, you got to go where you're comfortable.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I've had, I've enjoyed all those meetings, and I think really the most important thing about the meetings is learning how to live with discomfort. You
Mhm.
know, I think in the beginning, my goal for the first 10 years of my recovery was like to be a perfect person. And it
Mhm.
took me 10 years to realize that that is not what the program is. That's
Mhm.
not what recovery is. Recovery isn't about trying to become perfect and like
Mhm.
do everything right. It's not about like in whether you're in 12 step or outside of 12 step, there's most modalities in recovery have some component of making amends and doing inventories and all that stuff. And I used to think for years that was you do that because you want to get to a place where you're a perfect person that never bumps into people in life. And
Mhm.
my sponsor, who I still have, um he was like cracking up. He's like, "Where did you get that idea?" And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" He's like,
Yeah.
"You do." He's like, "You learn how to make amends, not to be a perfect person." He's like, "You
Right.
do it
Not to
because
like clean your slate off and start over. You do
and just
it.
be a monk." Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like you do that because you develop the humility to start saying sorry and making
Right.
amends all the time. He's like, because you're a
Yeah.
human being and you're gonna constantly be bumping into people. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously you want to be less of. I mean, I was aqua lung when I came into recovery, so yes, I've become much less feral of a human being, and I probably don't bother people as much as I used to, but I still am always bothering someone. And you got to just learn how to be accountable, and know what an amends is, what that actually means. Like there's an apology and then there's an amends, and knowing the
Right.
difference.
I love that you brought it up that your sponsor was like, "Oh no, this isn't to give you a clean slate. This is to learn how to do this because you're going to be doing this every day for the rest of your life."
It was one of those like my mind was like,
Oh,
and I was like, what?
did
It
you
took me
feel like the
10 years.
shackles come off, or did you feel like just, "Oh, I am now have been misled in my brain of what
It was
life
just,
is going
yeah,
to
it just
be"?
felt kind of like I don't remember what I felt other than like my mind was blown that it was like, holy cow, that's a what was like the time I remembered, thy will be done.
Mhm.
And then it's super religious, but I remember that was pounded into my head. And then it was like, and you hear that a lot in 12 step in the readings,
Mhm.
thy will be done. And I always heard that as my will be done. To me, that was like my
Right.
will be
Well,
done.
that's more comfortable. Yeah. Like,
it
give
took
me the
me
power, give me the control. That's what I want.
it took me years to realize that thy is not me. That's this idea of something other than me.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
will of
I,
something outside of me be done, not my will, which is like, oh wow,
yes.
that was took me 15 years to realize that word. I claim dyslexia, but it's probably worse than dyslexia, not getting that.
The misinterpretation.
Yeah, it
The
was
misinterpretation of Keida.
willing application of dyslexia in that for 15 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, I love control. That's my real drug. If we want to talk about real addiction, mine is control. Anything I can
Yeah,
find control in, that's what I'm into. And I can't go a day without getting a hit of that. And I've gotten way better. Al-Anon has really helped me. Other programs have helped me, but and therapy has helped me, but I still push comes to shove. I love some good control any way I can get it. That's how I'm going to feel like I'm high as a kite. In your uh like, do you in your recovery, I guess staying on the food and body stuff, like, do you have a sobriety or an abstinence for, like, the sugar stuff, or do you kind of let yourself do what you need to do to maintain other levels of sobriety? Because when you stop drinking and doing drugs, yes, you're gonna crave sugar, like, that's just how it's gonna be. There's a reason why you see a lot of people who are in AA always have sugar on them or always have a hospitality at their meetings or, kind of that's kind of like a telltale sign. Um,
I love
so
how
do
you
you
call
kind
it
of
a hospitality at the meetings. That's funny. I've
yeah,
never
because
heard of.
some people have pre-pandemic, we had these little like some of the meetings would like have hospitality. They would have like people would bring snacks. There would
Oh
be
yeah,
like
this
drinks,
spreads it.
refreshments. there was
In
like
Hollywood, I've
some
seen
meetings.
craft services.
Oh, yes. And like it's usually a service position, which means every six
Yeah.
months someone volunteers and they, get the money from the treasury and they go buy the things and they're like, who wants what from Trader Joe's? Do I have any requests? I got Girl Scout cookie. They like make an announcement at the meeting. Hey, everybody, just so you
Yeah.
know, I've got some Thin Mints at the table. So make sure you stop by, so like the hospitality stuff. So, but do you have like an abstinence or sobriety? Do you have any kind of like for your food stuff or for the sugar stuff?
I mean, uh,
And this isn't to shame you if you don't. I'm
yeah,
just
thanks for
curious.
shaming me on your podcast. At
No,
least they
I
have to.
know.
What time is it? It's 58 minutes. They at least get through 58 minutes, then they deserve to hear me shamed. No, it's
Never, never.
no, that's a good question, and I would say what do they say in AA would be like controlled drinking.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
So I've got a program of controlled chocolate eating right now.
Controlled chocolate eating. Okay.
Controlled chocolate eating. I Because here's the thing. So what's happening is like I don't have like my weight is just kind of where it's at. You know what I mean? I'm trying to
Hmm.
I'm obsessed with like getting down to like $170. I'm usually leaning towards $180 and sometimes over, which is when I'm getting really uncomfortable. But
Hmm.
it's all vanity. It has nothing to do with like no one outside of my brain gives a fuck.
Right. No doctor is telling you like, look, you really need to
Oh
do A,
no.
B, and C.
Oh no, that's not true. What the doctors do, and this fucking drives me crazy, is they say I'm obese.
Well, yes, because of the BMI thing, but like no one's like, according to your blood panel, according to like
This
your
woman,
actual health and well-being.
this
The
woman came
BMI
up to
is
me one
nuts.
day.
Nobody
Yeah, this
listened to the
woman came
BMI.
up to me
It's
one day.
terrible.
The nurse, she's like, "Sir, you've got to watch what you're eating." And I was like, "What are you fucking talking about?" Like, how do? She's like, "Your BMI is 31," and I'm like,
See, I'm so
31.
unfamiliar
I'm
with
like,
what that is. I don't even know what that means. Like that's just a random
well,
number
it
to me.
technically numerically according to their system. Yeah, if you
You
did
should be dead already.
if
You should be
if
dead from.
no, it just means you're morbidly obese. If you did
Oh my god.
the skin pinching thing
Oh
and did
yeah,
a
that.
that would if you were 30% or more by that, then it does mean you're obese and and you fall into that category. If you could have some really bad health consequences because of that. Now, I am not. I mean, if I took I could lose 10 pounds, but like I still have definition in my stomach. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
So it was. I'm sitting there. And I'm like, I am not obese. I just happen to be a short, stocky, muscular. I mean, my legs are giant
Italian
because
guy.
I'm Italian. Yeah, and it's just the metrics aren't right. They base
No,
it
the
off of
BMI is
like
terrible. The BMI is
yeah.
terrible. Anybody who's struggling with hearing that kind of information, please get a second opinion or do some other research because it's not correct and it's giving people, a really inaccurate idea. Bodies are not, and this is the thing. Like I ask you about, do you have a sobriety with the sugar? Do you have an abstinence with the food stuff? But like what I hear in your response is very unique to your own situation, right? Like you're not doing drugs, you're not drinking. So the sugar is kind of your thing. The caffeine is kind of your thing. Now, do you also kind of have a tab on it? Are you kind of like, concerned about it because you want to look a certain way? Yes. But this is the gray area that the podcast is really kind of about, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, so I'm interviewing you about eating and body stuff. And like, that easily anybody listening would be like, well, you don't qualify here and you don't have that. So what are, like everybody wants to put everybody in a box. I want to put myself in a box and I can't. I want to put everybody in a box and I can't. And the
Well,
fact of the matter is there's so much more gray in
let
all of
me
it.
get let me try to answer this as succinctly as I can because it's a great question. No, I don't have. I'm not currently in a meeting. I'm not in a meeting where I have a sponsor on my ass about food. Now, I'm lucky. I'm not in a situation where my eating is so out of control and causing me, unmanageability on a massive level. And
Mhm.
it could happen. It just isn't happening, and for
Mhm.
whatever the reason.
Mhm.
Um, but here's the thing: if I'm gonna frame it in terms of what are the wolves that are circling my wagon right now.
Mhm.
One of them is one wolf is vanity
Mhm.
and wanting to be seen as a sexually viable option on the pastures of fucking LA.
Mhm.
And that wolf is kind of gnawing at my leg right now, and I'm kind of, I'm exiting the pool, whether regardless of my weight.
This is
I'm
a
just
very graphic imagery, and I do like graphic
awful.
imagery as
Okay.
storytelling. And I do think that a lot of people will relate to this, not just in aging, but also in living in LA, because there is such an increased pressure to look a certain way. Whether you're in the industry or not, like just
Yeah.
because you've exited an industry, like it doesn't mean that that goes away. Like it just doesn't. And for anybody to think that like, well, I'm not doing a job now where I even have to worry about it, so who cares? Like it's there. It's there. It's going to be there. It's probably not leaving anytime soon. So I relate to
Yeah.
that. So you've got one wolf
So
circling the wagon, dragging you by your leg.
I've got one, my left leg, one wolf has, and that's the vanity wolf. We'll call it vanity wolf. Then I've
Sounds like a
got
great band.
vanity wolf. They're playing tonight at the Echo Park Lodge, or the Echo Park. Yeah. And then the other wolf is diabetes, which I don't have diabetes, but I'm close to pre-diabetes. That's a real thing. My dad has
Yeah, you
diabetes,
said your family had some has
and
some.
I've seen this one number. See, this is the thing. If you're listening to this and you're also a short, squat, fucking Italian guy,
I
then
feel like that's not typically my demographic, but I hope it is.
well, hey, it could be a short, squat Italian woman. That's that is also hearing that you're obese when you're not.
Yeah,
The thing to look at, in my opinion, is more the numbers. What are the blood numbers?
right,
What's the blood stuff telling you?
right.
And in my case, so I've got I forget the number. It's a number that is blood sugar number, and that number is getting dangerously close to the
Is
edge
it like
where
glucose or like
it's like, yeah, it's like, I think
something?
it's
I don't
glucose
know.
number or
I'm not a
something.
doctor.
It it's right around that edge where if it goes over that, if it grows up to the next level, then it's in the range of pre-diabetes, and you don't want to go there, because
Right.
once you're in pre-diabetes, then it's a slippery slide towards full diabetes, and that's just like, you don't want it
Hmm.
for a number of reasons. So that's wolf number 2, and that's gnawing on my right leg.
Okay, so
And
they've
then
both got a leg.
both, so 2 legs are wolves are on, and then the third wolf is cholesterol,
Hmm.
and my cholesterol numbers are higher than they need to be, and that I want them to be, and that's the other wolf. Now, some of those, this is an abstract, complicated discussion, because some of those are genetic
Hmm.
issues that have very little to do with what I'm eating, and some of them do have to do with what I'm eating directly. And
Hmm.
so, and I think all of those numbers would benefit for sure if I totally took out sugar and totally didn't eat chocolate, and was super strict. Um, so it's just one of those, and like if I just didn't eat chocolate and didn't overeat, the two issues with me is emotional overeating
Hmm.
and chocolate.
Hmm.
Sometimes an occasion ice cream, but it's mostly chocolate. Like I
Hmm.
will literally be sitting there minding my fucking business, nowhere near a store, and then
Hmm.
all of a sudden, like like the other day, a malted milk ball came through my brain. I haven't had a malted milk ball. I don't remember it, like when I was trick or treating when I was a kid.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
all of a sudden, I had like some crazy flashback, you know, uh, momentary food psychosis, and it came into my brain, and I literally went on, and this is how embarrassing it is. I got up from work. I was working.
Hmm.
Many would call this unmanageability. I'm working on a paid gig, not
Hmm.
on the set, but I'm at home editing a paid gig. I got up, went in my car, I'm like, where the fuck do you even buy malted milk balls? I haven't even
Whoppers.
seen one. Whoppers, exactly, those
Hey.
specific kind. So
Yeah.
I'm like, So I drive up to Gelson's. Of course, Gelson's doesn't have it because I
Gelson's ain't
realize
gonna have it.
Whoppers are kind of like they're hillbilly. They're not. They're not going to be in a
Gelson's isn't
chic
gonna have
place.
anything good.
No.
And if they
So
do, it's gonna be 3 times the price.
so I go to Vons. Vons does
There
not
you go.
fucking have milk. No, they don't have it either. So
No?
I finally
Dollar
had
store?
to get to a CVS before
Oh, okay, okay.
I went to 3 places, and this is how bad it was. So I get there and I notice that they had the boxes were $2 a $2.50 a box, but 3 for $5.
Oh,
And I was like,
okay.
holy shit, because I knew I was going to eat a box and a half.
You're like, deal of the century.
So I was like, okay, I need to just deal with this. So I bought, instead of just having, all I needed, this is the reality. I just needed 3. I needed 3.
Just needed one hit. You just
Just
needed one hit.
enough. Just a, like a little taste, a little toot of Coke, right? I just needed, but I saw this through. I was like, you know what? This is a sale. It might go away. 3
now
boxes.
you're feeling, the lack and limitation.
I can push this obsession out for like maybe 4 or 5 days.
Right. You could.
So I get up to the counter to
ration it.
buy the goddamn things, and I realize my phone number doesn't work because I hate logging my phone number in with CVS because I'm like, I hate this place. But I was too lazy I didn't want to fucking deal with joining it. So I ended up having to spend $7.50
because you bought all 3.
Whoppers. I just went in there for a little bag of Whoppers that I was prepared to spend $1. I ended up spending $7.50
Because you didn't get the deal, but you didn't want to put any back.
No, because at that point I'm like, I'm not putting the cocaine back on the shelf.
Yeah, you've already.
It's in my
you've already
hand.
committed to this. You've already.
It's
committed.
already. Yeah, I'm committed.
It's already happening. You've already written
and
it.
then I ate 3 boxes in 2 fucking days. And I was out of my mind high on chocolate and sugar for 2 days. So you ask me where my program's at?
Yeah. I mean, this is just such a satisfying story for like people who have maybe a complicated relationship with food and what food does to them emotionally. And
and I'm going to add this to it. I went to the kiosk, which I always bitch about the kiosk because I'm like, I think it's bullshit that people are being displaced job-wise because they want to make more money. But the kiosk is
the self-checkout. Is that what you're talking about? The self-checkout
kiosk is convenient when you're hiding the fact that you're buying. Like,
100%. I don't. Yeah.
What dude who looks like me and is my age walks into a CVS at 2:30 in the afternoon and buys 3 boxes of
that is you.
Whoppers?
That is all you and like your own judgment. Because I guarantee you whoever was checking you out is just like whatever, man. Like there's so many more embarrassing things.
They're not no, because they are. You're right, because they are not noticing me on a sexual level either.
No.
So
even if they
invisible.
were, I think even if they were checking you out on a sexual level, I think they're just like whatever, dude. Like there's so many more embarrassing things you could put through the checkout line. Like I'm not even going to start naming them if you're at a drugstore, but there is like so many more embarrassing things. So I do also like the self checkout kiosk is always a little better just for a myriad of reasons. But that story is, I mean, like take out Whoppers and put in anything else. If you take out Whopper and you put in the word alcohol, if you take out Whopper and you put in the word, cocaine, which you even did because there is that like immediate high. Now, Whoppers are not going to, have you run your car into a tree or something. Whoppers aren't going to, yet, unless you're like driving and you've got the box like, in your face and you're like tilted your chin up to like throw them down your throat and you're not paying attention.
Look, I'm telling you, it's possible.
So I won't take it off the table, but I mean, I think it's a really good story to like share with people that there's a lot of gray area in this stuff, and it's okay, and it's like it shows up in a lot of different ways.
The whole way home, I was like, as I'm eating the Whoppers, I'm like, this is insanity. This is insanity.
This is insanity. This is unmanageability. And were you reciting like, God give me the strength to,
No,
were you
I don't
were
do
you
that when I'm.
you don't do any of the none
I
of the
do
prayers?
that when I'm feeling good.
Yeah, okay. All right. So you were like whoppers are like, nope, no serenity prayer.
I was like, I'm already in. I'm already
I'm in
in.
it. I'm in it.
I'm just gonna enjoy it. I'm not gonna fuck it up with a prayer. No. I'll
Nice,
pray
nice.
like it. I'll start praying when the box is done and I'm like geeked out on sugar and
Yeah.
I'm out of the sugar. The reality is with the malted milk balls, and the reason I bring in the three wolves is because there will be a certain point where the wolves. I don't know how close the wolves need to get to my heart
Mhm.
before I surrender to milk duds or
Mhm.
whatever malted milk balls. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like there will come a time where I'm like, okay, if I continue to eat chocolate, I'm going to have to accept the fact that I'm going to have diabetes, or I'm going to have
Mhm.
to accept that I'm 20 pounds heavier than I want to be, or I'm going to have to accept cholesterol statins or something.
Mhm.
You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like I'm going to have to, because that's the deal with addiction.
Mhm.
Addiction is not free, and everything ramps up. The costs of addiction keep going up. And at a certain point, you know, it's like, am I willing to keep kicking the can down the road, or am I going
Mhm.
to just deal with it? And,
Right.
most things I've dealt with, and some things are still lingering around, and food is one of those last things that, for the most part, like where I'm at with my food thing is I'm bargaining.
Mhm.
I'm going to make homemade food that's super highly nutritious. It's like carbon credits, but
Mhm.
for me, it's malted milk ball credits. That's what.
Yes.
All right, so fuck the wolves. Malted milk ball credits.
Yes.
So for every 10 ingredient frittata that I make with no salt, no oil, and one egg yolk,
Mhm.
I get to eat a handful of malted milk balls.
Mhm.
That's called bargaining.
Yes.
That's a malted milk ball cap,
Yes.
and I trade them.
Yes.
So this is where my recovery is now. That
I
is
mean,
not
listen,
full recovery, but it's better than just no rules.
it's a gray area, and this is the thing. You have to take your independent situation into account. Anybody does if they're looking
Yeah,
in, right? So you were someone who was addicted to drugs and alcohol.
yeah.
Yeah, those are really, really intense things.
Now drugs and alcohol, it was very different.
And they're
You
really
know,
hard to stop when you have an addictive personality and you're primed for that.
look, being on coke, heroin, and booze, I did not have the lug. Those were not wolves. Those were like sharknadoes
Hmm.
on my legs. That was totally a different scenario. Could not
Right.
function at all. Like I can sit here and
Right.
edit and sneak a few fucking malted milk
Whoppers.
balls,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how you're gonna post this podcast. This is doing the
Because
opposite of
this
what I
is
think you're
no, it's
going
not.
after.
No, it's not. This is no, actually, you proved the podcast, which is gray maybe. It's not black or white, and it's not yes or no. It's a lot of maybe, and it's a lot of gray area. Because for you, I look at you, I'm like, this is recovery. Absolutely, this is recovery. And it's like dicey in this area, something you might still struggle with. But I've had other people on the podcast too. They're like, I'm not recovered. I'm not recovered. I am trying to do this, this, and this, but I haven't arrived. And I think anybody should be wary if they think they are. I mean, maybe some people are, but I know for me, it's an everyday, work in progress. And as things come up, I address them. I guarantee you, there are things I'm blind to that I haven't discovered yet. You know?
Food, and what's interesting too, and I think this is really important. Each issue that someone's in recovery for, some of them are moving targets.
Mm-hmm.
You know, drugs and alcohol. The fortune of drugs and alcohol being your issue is that there is really, I mean, there is this California sober fucking thing now.
Right. And those
That
of you who don't know, California sober is not drinking, but smoking weed.
yeah, you can
Right.
smoke pot, you can trip your balls off. I mean, I
Okay,
I
so
don't
like
get that.
hallucinogenics and
Yeah,
weed, but you're just not drinking. So that's
not
called
drinking and not hard
California sober.
drugs. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Although some of those, I mean, Jesus Christ, an edible
Right.
today is like acid was when I
All
was
of it is
coming up.
pretty intense. Yeah.
It's
All the
really,
weed
really
nowadays.
insane. I would never
Yeah.
want to. Anyway, so it's like that. We have, as an addict in that category, you have the luxury of it. It is very black and white. You don't drink and you don't
Mhm.
use.
Mhm.
And luckily, there's no need really to function off of coke and heroin and alcohol. Like it's just not. You don't need it on any level unless you're addicted to it, and that's an
Right.
abstraction. Um,
Right.
but like food is really tricky because food.
You
I
have
mean,
to eat.
you have to
You have to
eat.
eat. Yeah.
You have to eat,
Mhm.
and certain things, like there have been certain things that were not a problem food that all of a sudden morphed into a problem food. You know
Right.
what I mean? And for
Right.
me, it's like I loved, like uh, almonds. I love almonds, and for a while I was eating almonds as like a healthy alternative. Well, it's a healthy alternative until you're eating like a pound of fucking almonds a day, and it's
Right.
like costing you hundreds of dollars, and it's just your stomach's getting upset
Yeah, it
because
can't be too good for you, that amount of nuts.
no
Like nuts are good for
nobody's
you, but
supposed to
like
be
any
eating. I'm
one
not a
thing,
squirrel. You know what I mean?
right?
Like so it's so with the food thing, I feel like the food is way more complicated than like drugs and alcohol
Yeah.
are like the really easy. It's like
Yeah,
it's
it's an
cut and
easy
dry.
sobriety. You're either doing it or you're not.
I mean,
You're
it's
either
not
sober or you're
easy to
not.
be sober from that, but
No.
it's very cut and dry, and that's a nice
Yes.
thing. Because sex
Yes.
and love. I mean, you got hugging someone can turn into there's
Right.
so many moving parts with some of these other addictions that. So for me, the food thing has had to be. I look at it like, okay, what is unmanageability, and where is the unmanageability? And what does that look like? And it can look like different things at different times.
Mhm.
And so in a way I have to just be and I have to be reasonable with myself.
Mhm.
Now that's me. I know people that I have people that are very close to me that are like morbidly obese, and their addiction to food is like on a level that is pretty much the same as what I was dealing with drugs and alcohol.
Mhm.
They don't have the luxury that I have.
Mhm.
Their situation is much worse.
Right. You can be a little casual in this area, you
Yeah,
know?
like I'm not my situation is not immediately life and death.
Mhm.
Now,
Mhm.
if I eat a bunch of milk chocolate for the rest of my life, yeah, it might eventually turn into
Mhm.
a it might accelerate diabetes, it might, cause plaque buildup in my arteries
Mhm.
more than I would have otherwise. But
Mhm.
those are much more slow burning problems than like somebody that's literally going to have a diabetic coma because at 50 because they're not taking care of their body at all through food.
Mhm.
So in a way, in OA and in other similar groups, it's kind of up to you to come up with like, well, what is the bottom line? Because what's
Right.
the bottom line
Right.
for one person, like we were saying before, like one person they see a peanut butter and they start having a panic attack,
Mhm.
where the other
Mhm.
person it's a donut. You know what I mean?
Right.
So you just don't. And the person with the peanut butter might be able to eat a donut. That's the thing that's
Mhm.
so nuts about
Right.
food is that
Very
it's a
individual.
lot more
All of the
complicated than
food and body stuff is very individual. Yeah.
absolutely. And what I've been body dysmorphic on different levels.
Mhm.
I've gone through periods of body dysmorphia where it's like, I see myself as worse off, but now I see myself as better off. I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh, I look all right tonight. And then I go out and I start seeing pictures on Instagram that people have taken. I'm like, Jesus Christ, what the fuck happened between my
I'll tell you what happened.
mirror and like that party? I gained
And
50 pounds and shrunk an inch.
I'll tell you what happened. In addition to body dysmorphia, it's HD. It's fucking HD. We're getting older and the pictures are getting younger. Like the pictures are
But
getting
it's
more
not that I look
detailed.
old. It's not that I look old. Like I'll be sitting there and I'm like, I'm a foot shorter and a foot wider, and I saw myself in the mirror. This happened a year ago. there was a red carpet event, and I was taking this friend of mine. I was super excited. I looked great in my mirror in the fucking bathroom. And then I get to the thing, and the photos start coming back. And I'm like, what happened on the way to Malibu? Because I didn't eat a
Another
goddamn
short film.
thing.
That's a great short
I
film
did
title.
not
What
eat a
happened?
thing.
What happened on the way to Malibu is
What
the
the
next
fuck
short
happened?
film. Yeah.
And I looked like a rodeo clown in front of the red carpet. And I'm like, this is crazy. This is also body dysmorphia, but not in the way that's beneficial. And,
well, nobody has body dysmorphia in a way that's beneficial. Let's be clear.
If you look better, but in your head you think you look awful, at least I would rather look better than I think I look.
I'll tell you right now, if you suffer from body dysmorphia, you actually don't know what you look like. You actually don't know. You have no idea. You think you know, but you actually have no idea. What I think you're describing is people who have body dysmorphia and people who are a predominant amount of men. So a predominant amount of men think they look better than they do. But then there is a lot of people who are body dysmorphic who are very much obsessed with the fact that they look not like they want to. And it's really can be very disturbing. And that can be anything from someone like me who wants to be thinner than I am. So I always see myself as bigger than I am, or there's certain facial features of mine that I get very fixated on that I want to change and make me very uncomfortable and keep me from doing certain things with my face, or people see me from certain angles. And then there's, people who are suffering from bigorexia who see themselves as small and that makes them feel weak and they want to be big and strong and muscular and they like go to these extreme lengths to attain that. And then there's like a majority of just like men that see that, because this doesn't typically happen to women because there's so much extra pressure on women to look a certain way. But there is a predominant group of men out in the world, all different ages, men that believe that they look better than they actually do. So that's the category of people you're talking about. You don't fit in that category, I don't think. You're much more in the body dysmorphic area with the rest of us. It's fine. Come on in. We're a fun group, for the most part. But that's so to answer your question, that's not actually body dysmorphia. Nobody has dysmorphia to the positive. That's just like slight delusion. But like body dysmorphia, like I think you are familiar with, and I am familiar with.
Yeah, no, I mean everything's distorted. But I will say it's really annoying. I don't know. Everything's, the sooner that the viewers, I will say this, if I've learned anything, the sooner you get used to just giving yourself a break and not just like find some way to just give up these insane like expectations. If you can just not give a fuck for 2 minutes, like that's some real recovery.
Yeah.
Because like so much of my problems are seated in these insane expectations, whether they're the dysmorphia stuff or whether they're, will you stop, lay down, Rock, hold on. And like having to be right and perfect and like,
right,
I don't know
that
what
pressure,
I'm trying to say.
that pressure, the self-pressure, the pressure on yourself to be whatever you think you're supposed to be or whatever you want to be.
Like the thing about the clown class that's so nice is that it is such the brutality of knowing that I cannot escape the fact that I'm going to look awful in the class in front of all these people. And you know what? They're going to look awful too. That's what we're in the class for.
Right. That's kind of the point.
The point of the class is to just destroy the ego. Destroy the ego and just be comfortable being uncomfortable. Like that's the name of the game. If I have to be comfortable in order to feel comfortable, I'm in trouble. And that's in every aspect of life. And just giving up that fight. I don't know. I used to fight a lot more.
Well, this leads me to my last question for you, which you kind of, I think, just answered it, but I'll ask you this question in case there's anything you want to add to it. My last question for you is, I always say that I'm not in the business of giving advice because I'm in a program for that. But if you had any suggestion for anyone who might be suffering right now, in addition to clown class, In addition to giving yourself a break for 2 minutes and trying to let go of those expectations, is there anything you would add to that for suggestion for someone who might be suffering?
Mm. I think, oh God, that's a huge question. There's so many answers to give on that question. I mean, I think one of the things that's really important is that, and this is a hard question to, this is a hard answer, but it's the true answer, is that we as human beings, if you're an adult, you have to take responsibility.
Hmm.
And a lot of these issues that we have were inherited issues, but the reality is when you become an adult, you not only inherit the issue or the issues, in my case plural, you inherit the responsibility now because you're an adult.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean you're responsible for the issue,
Right.
like what how it came, how it
Right.
manifested, all that, but the hot potato is now in your lap.
Right.
And when you're an adult, you just can't pass it now. There's no one to pass
Hmm.
it to,
Hmm.
And so what does that look like? It looks like, I mean, if you're in a city like LA, you know, or any big metropolitan area, you're really lucky because any major metropolitan area is going to have, you know, any number of therapists, any number
Hmm.
of 12-step meetings. Now with Zoom, even if you're not in a metropolis, you can get on Zoom and find meetings. You
Hmm.
know, I think that the thing that's the most helpful that I can think of is fellowship.
Hmm.
Like other people, getting connected with
Connection.
other
Yep.
people. Connection. There have been many studies about addiction being a disease of isolation.
Hmm.
I love isolating.
Same.
I Back in the day, I used to like to get drugs and do them by myself.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people with the food
I
stuff too, they're eating by themselves, they're throwing up by themselves, or they're restricting by themselves because they don't want to eat with other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was ritualistic. I remember getting Coke and then going home and doing Coke by myself.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Like most people I know that are casual users would
They're like,
want to.
that's the last thing. Why
It's
would you ever do
crazy.
it
I
by
want to go out and
yourself?
be
It's
with
a
my
party
friends and
drug.
do Coke. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
was like, man, I wanted to be home. I didn't want to be around people. So
Hmm.
it's an isolation thing. So I think, finding a way to get into fellowship and at some point in really wrapping your brain around, you have to, the key out of the cave is that you have to find a way. You can't you can't put on the world the requirement that you feel comfortable to get somewhere.
Hmm.
You have to be, it's about getting comfortable feeling uncomfortable
Hmm.
on so many different levels of life.
Hmm.
If the bar is I got to feel comfortable, you're going to be in a box.
Yeah.
You're going to be in
Yeah.
a box. And I know
Especially
that
for artists. For
oh,
artists, you cannot expect to be an artist and just remain comfortable.
you have to be willing to get out of your comfort zone and be like, yes, like I remember in my recovery in the early days, I remember someone told me about like when I have all kinds of anxiety or whatever the discomfort is, they said, imagine you're in a living room and there's a mantle. They said,
Hmm.
take your discomfort or your obsession, invite it into the room, say, hey, good to see you, put it on the mantle, let it be in the room. Don't overreact to it, but don't try to deny that it's there.
Hmm.
Let it in the room, and that's the hardest, most contrarian thing when you're suffering. It's like, oh, I don't want to, if you're
Hmm.
suffering with addiction, like, and whatever it is. The thing is, you said control, it is a disease of control,
Hmm.
and you don't conquer that by controlling that.
Right.
It's so funny. I have so many friends that are active alcoholics, and they're like, and I'm like, well, why don't you go to a meeting? They're like, well, I'll go to a meeting when I've got a couple days of sobriety. I'm like, that's the whole fucking point of going to a
Yeah.
meeting. If you could do
Yeah.
that, you wouldn't need to go to a meeting,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, go to the fucking meeting.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? If you can't
Yeah.
put down the food, go to the meeting,
Yeah.
stuff whatever your food is in your mouth on your way into the door.
Right.
Get to the
Right.
meeting. If you have to take a
Right.
break and go out to your car and eat something else or what,
Right.
do it. Get to the meeting though.
Hmm.
Prioritize being in the meeting. Prioritize the fellowship. Because my
Right.
experience is if you prioritize the fellowship and it like you don't get sober, what happens is I firmly believe this. If you go to meetings long enough and with enough consistency and regularly, what happens is everything osmosis happens. Things
Hmm.
change in your brain that you don't have any control over as long as you're showing up.
Yep.
You know, I used to when I was newly sober, I used to think that I was under this illusion that I had to control. I had to. It's the control thing. I had
Right.
to get sober. I had to do all the
Right.
work, and I had to. You know, it was like, oh my God, it's if I don't do 8 million things, I'm not going to be sober. Now, I'm not saying you don't have to do work. You do have to do work.
Hmm.
A lot of work that you're not comfortable with, probably in the beginning. But the reality is, looking back, 90% of recovery is just finding your seat and sitting your ass down
Yep.
and
Yep.
participating. The
Yep.
They say in the meetings, we don't work the program works us.
Hmm.
That's what that means. It means you sit
Hmm.
down and something in the air, it just you will find yourself sober. I've never met
Hmm.
someone that goes to meetings regularly or participates that eventually doesn't get some relief.
Some
I've never
relief.
seen
Yeah.
it.
Same. Yeah.
You know, it's like you have and it needs to be a surrender of I remember I got about a year before I got actually sober. I remember sitting there and I remember I was like, I just can't. I'm gonna die an alcoholic and drug addict.
Hmm.
I just knew it. I was like, I'm gonna die. There's no hope for this. But I kept
Hmm.
going to meetings. That moment was the first moment of step one for me.
Hmm.
That's when I truly had a moment with myself where I worked to step one, which is like my life is complete. I'm an alcoholic and my life is out of control.
Hmm.
I had never worked that step properly before that moment,
Hmm.
you know, and it
Yeah.
was that acknowledgement of complete lack of control and just like, I can't do anything about this. And I
Hmm.
went to meetings anyway because actually I had a lot of friends that I had been meeting and making in meetings that I like to be around. And
Hmm.
I didn't believe it was going to work. I thought I was
Right.
like, I'm going to die an alcoholic and addict, but I'm going to keep
Hmm.
going to these meetings just because
Right.
I am having fun meeting these people, and you know, I'm just going to stay here until I die.
Yeah.
And then a year later, I just found myself sober, you know, and so if you're suffering, you're probably more alone than you need to be.
Right. Yeah.
I don't
Good
know a lot
point.
of people that are deeply connected to other people that are always in the middle of the herd that are like suffering massively. I'm
Right.
not saying it doesn't exist, but it's very rare.
Well, and like deep meaningful relationships where you can be your whole self
Yeah,
in is also different than just being around people, right? I think that a lot
absolutely.
of
Yeah.
young people might also mistake having friends online or in person and hanging out for deep, intimate relationships where you can be your full self and share and be honest.
No, no, no.
So,
That is a key point because there have been people in recovery where it's like they're the AA, you know, king, and then you hear them jumping off a roof at 15 years sober. That
mhm,
happens a lot,
mhm,
and it's because I mean I don't know. I'm not a mystic, but it's I looking at it, it's like there was some hiding, you
right,
know, even in the recovery and even behind all that artifice of recovery, there was hiding going on. Something was going on. You don't just like
right,
have this great
right.
life and then jump off a fucking building. You know what I mean? So it's about you got to be willing to get vulnerable and you got to be willing to communicate with other fellows and human beings. And that's, you know, yeah, I mean that's been my experience.
Yeah. Keida, thank you for lending your time and your expertise and your experiences and your vulnerability and your extra vulnerability with the clown school and telling us all about all of the things. I really enjoyed hearing your perspective, hearing your stories, and I just can't thank you enough for being willing
Oh,
to talk
thank
about it
you.
today.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I hope it helps.
I hope so too. And I am looking forward to getting an update on the clown school.
I will totally give you an update.
Keida's story is one of so many twists and turns. His description of the whack-a-mole nature of addiction is so perfect. Addiction is sneaky. It sometimes morphs and transfers, and it's not a decision. No one wakes up deciding to be addicted to something. I believe the repetitive use of anything, behaviors included, to substitute feelings we often wish to avoid can eventually lead us to being addicted. To me, Keida fits perfectly in the gray. Like so many of us that wonder if we qualify for this or that, so many of our paths and problems don't fit in black and white boxes neatly. Real life isn't easily categorized. Just like the answer to if we have a problem isn't always yes or no, the answer to if we don't have a problem isn't always a yes or no, but certainly could be a maybe. I can't thank Keida enough for lending his valuable time and sharing his stories leading up to his recovery and with so much honesty. I hope you found something that resonated in my conversation with Keida today. If you're listening to this episode and you're realizing that you are more like Keida and I than not, welcome. And I hope this helps you take a step in the direction of recovery if you haven't already. You are not alone. Just a reminder for anyone who needs to hear it. You don't need to wait until you're sick enough to get help. In fact, you don't have to be sick at all. Just a desire to feel a little better. If you're listening and right now you're struggling with an ED, disordered eating, or other behaviors, welcome. Know that whatever you're feeling, there are those among us that have probably felt it too. You're not alone. If you're listening because you have someone you love in your life that is suffering or is in recovery for an ED, welcome. You are also not alone. Even having an eating disorder myself, I have not reacted the best I could to others who were struggling before my own recovery. I've attached the do's and don'ts of how to deal with someone's suffering in the show notes, as well as how to contact Keida and myself, and various links for help and recovery when and if you're ready. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening, and I hope you were able to find something relatable in today's episode. As I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, this is also a social experiment to see if in telling my story, I can embolden listeners to share their stories. If you'd like me to read your recovery story on this topic, anonymous or otherwise, on the podcast, please email graymaybestories@gmail.com, graymaybestories@gmail.com. Thank you to everyone who helped make this Gray Maybe podcast happen. Producer and editor Roderick Barge, cover photo by Jose Perez, music licensed by Pixabay, special counsel Jada Ellingham and Roderick Barge. Special shout out to supporter Patty Olgan. If you'd like to support this podcast, please rate, share, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, bye for now.